Hi there, and welcome to First Time Mums Chat, podcast that's here to guide you through the ups and downs of early motherhood. I'm your host, Helen Thompson, a qualified childcare educator and baby massage instructor with over 20 years of experience helping mums just like you feel more confident and connected as you embark on this incredible journey. Each episode, I bring you practical tips, heartfelt stories, and expert advice to make your parenting experience a little smoother and a lot less overwhelming. In today's episode, I'm joined by licensed mental health therapist Alison Lee, who shares her personal story as a second-generation immigrant mum, navigating cultural expectations, family dynamics, and the pressure to get it all right. If you've ever felt torn between wanting to honor family traditions and finding your own way, this conversation is for you. We'll uncover how to set boundaries with confidence, whether it's with grandparents who mean well, but overstep, or in laws who challenge your parenting style. Have you ever wondered, how do I keep the peace while staying true to my values? If so, you'll love the actionable tips Alison shares to help you avoid burnout and strengthen the relationships that matter most. So grab a cup of tea and let's dive in to this empowering chat that's packed with tools to help you thrive as a mum. You don't want to miss this episode. If you're a new mum, or if you're about to commence your parenting journey, then you'll know that many women in our modern fast-paced world feel alone and unsupported. Many are isolated and lack support from members of their family, such as their mothers or other close feminine role models. I'm your host, Helen Thompson, and I'm a childcare educator and baby massage instructor with many years' experience working with families. I started the First Time Mums Chat podcast in 2021 to help support mums as they face the challenges and struggles that parenting often involves, particularly when getting started for the first time. To help ease your transition into parenthood, I aim to offer supportive, holistic approaches and insights for mums of babies aged mainly from 4 weeks to 10 months old. In each episode, you'll hear insights from experts and other mums to help you become the most confident parent you can. Let's do this together. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please contact a medical practitioner if you are concerned or have any medical issues. Alison, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here on the podcast. As a licensed mental health therapist and second-generation immigrant mum, you bring such a unique and valuable perspective. I know my listeners are going to benefit so much from your insights on navigating family expectations, setting boundaries, and finding their own parenting groove. Could you share more about your background and what inspired you to focus on this area?
Yeah. So I'm Allison Lee. I'm a licensed mental health therapist and I have my own private practice and I've recently started a coaching program. I am a second generation myself, meaning I have parents who immigrated to the country I'm born in. That experience was so significant to me and I recognized that the people around me who were also second gens had immigrant parents dealt with a lot of the same struggles and challenges when I went to college and kind of got out of my little hometown. It wasn't such a common experience, yet it was not talked about so much. So this is why this is my niche. I love working with adults who have immigrant parents and are just trying to navigate figuring out who they are, where they want to hold their values, and really strengthen the relationships that they have with their families while also figuring out how they want to show up in the world. That's really important to me because that's something that I had to struggle with and kind of figure out. And I know that that's generally a struggle that a lot of my friends, peers, and people I work with really struggle with as well. So that's how I got to where I am. And I wouldn't be where I am today with my career and how I just grew up without people helping me along the way. So I just want to also be able to give back.
Yeah, it's hard when you move from a different country and have to learn their ways. I had to do that because I moved from Scotland to Australia, and it is a hard challenge. So, what are some of the boundaries that you found really hard when you first moved to where you are now?
So my parents moved to the US and I was born in California. But being the middle
Mhm.
person, the glue between my parents' culture, generations, language, and the new culture,
Yeah.
new language, that was really difficult because I often, especially back then, sometimes was a translator, sometimes was filling out paperwork for her as a young child just because I
Mm.
knew more English. It just was something I would want to help my family with and kind of also was expected to help. So I think that was challenging in ways that where a lot of adults who have immigrant parents and know the language of the country they're living in tend to have a lot more responsibilities and expectations put on them, and they want to also help their family. So that sense of responsibility and kind of growing up doing a lot more than potentially other kids their age is really prominent.
As a mother now, how has it helped you to support mums who are going through the challenges that they may be going through now as an immigrant mum?
Yeah, so going back to the boundaries piece, knowing what my capacity is and knowing what our own capacities, our own needs are super important. I think sometimes when we're used to, as second gens, being used to taking care of other people or helping out other people, their needs often gets put in the back burner. So if we're not recognizing what our boundaries are, like, is this something I have space to do? Is this something I can do? Is this something I want to do today? If we're not recognizing those questions and answering that honestly, we can lead to burnout, and that can make us more exhausted, tired, resentful, which then affects all the other relationships that we have, right? So as a mom or as a child or as a partner, that also gets impacted. So especially as first-time moms, and this is like more of your population, as first-time moms, we're not sure, this is all new to us, what boundaries we have with our kids, our child, with parents, our own parents, or other people coming in to see our child. So that's why boundary setting, knowing what we're comfortable with, and being able to feel confident to speak up when something doesn't sit right or we just don't want this or don't want that is so important for first time moms. This is already such a sensitive and new time and such a new experience. So not having boundaries could be detrimental if it goes on for a really long time.
Yeah, I know whether you're from a different country or not, some grandparents come in and say, "Oh, why are you doing that with your child? I never did that with you. This is how you do it." I guess as a mum from a different country as well as a new mum, it's really hard for you to turn around and say, "Well, actually, mum, this is how we do it in this country." Or this is how I choose to do it. So can we just come to some kind of arrangement? If you don't, as you said, you'll be on burnout and get overwhelmed and you
Yeah,
just won't be able to
definitely.
stand up for yourself. That's what you're saying here, that you've got to care for yourself and have the strengths in yourself to say, look, hang on a moment, mum, thank you for helping me, but you're not helping me.
Yeah, right? Or like this worked for you and this is how I want to do it. And both ways could be right. Obviously, our parents raised us enough that we're functioning and alive now, so it worked to some capacity. But there's also other ways to do things that can have potentially a same or a different outcome, but there's more than one way to do things.
Yeah, and sometimes you think you're a bad mum because you're not doing it the way your parents did it and you're not doing it right. So you may feel that you're having a temper tantrum within yourself with your parents because they're not understanding. And I guess that's where it comes to the boundaries as well, having that strength to maybe understand those boundaries.
Yeah, or even share them because I think sometimes, especially in some cultures too, where sharing our thoughts can become like seemingly disrespectful or whatnot. And that's not always the intention, but it can be received that way, which is really difficult. But even going back to different perspectives, even now with how much social media is prominent, how much news and information is out there on Google, there's so
Mm.
many perspectives. And if we are not sure of what we want, we can easily have not only our parents, our family's perspective sway us and make us feel like not a good mom or not a good parent. It could also be what we see on social media. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. But when we're clear on our values and if this is good enough for what we want with our family, then we can approach things with much more confidence than we would if we're like feeling pulled in so many directions.
What was your own personal experience of this, of the boundaries you had with your own parents?
Yeah, and the first experiences as a parent was pretty similar to other boundaries that I had to set with my parents, where sometimes I didn't know what boundaries I needed until something happened, just like with other people. Sometimes if a person asks me a question and I'm like, oh, that didn't sit right with me, I might not recognize I need to set a boundary in the future until it happens. That's the beauty and the con of boundaries is sometimes we have to have something happen in order for us to recognize that we need it where we have a reaction or we have a discussion we don't feel comfortable with. So, of course, like similar to the example you shared as a first time mom, there are times where our mom's like, do this, do that. And then I'll be like, I don't want to do that. And then I'd have to be comfortable expressing that to her in a way that was true for me, but didn't try to dismiss her. And of course, that always wasn't perfect. The intention is to really acknowledge her and, yeah, express my point of view. Even just like how I put her to sleep or how much food she's drinking or how she's eating. There's so many things that could be different for parents previously.
Yeah. And when you were saying that, I was thinking how, if you're not confident as a person to be able to express that to your mum or your grandparent or whoever it is, because you're in a state anyway, because you've just had your baby, you just want to do it your way and you just want to relax. And you've got this parent coming in, and all you want to do is just to tell them to go away so that you can get on and give yourself self care and your baby. If you're not confident to do that as a person, what advice would you give to a mum who is going through that, who doesn't have the confidence to do what you've just shared?
Yeah. So the first thing is really normalizing that because, again, this is a first time experience as a first time mom. So there's no way you would have known how to do this, but it all comes down to practice. So, really having self compassion, being nice to ourselves as we see it happening, and don't judge ourselves or criticize ourselves for not being able to do it. But hey, let's make a plan for next time. If this really bothered me this time where they were giving me feedback on how to dress my baby, what do I want to say next time that
Mhm.
I feel good about? Practice it on our own, practice it with our partners, our friends, and then try to say it to them. So confidence only comes with practice. It's like if I never played soccer and I go and I play and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I was terrible and I don't feel confident." The only way to get more confident in soccer is if I play more and I practice. So the same thing with communication skills. This is a little different because how they respond is going to be out of our control. But as long as we practice and we feel good about what we're saying, I think that is really important to remember.
Yeah, and it can also be a language barrier as well, because if your parents or grandparents don't have a good command of the language, the country that you're in, and you do, or they don't know the different ways because they've just come over to visit from their country, it must be hard as well to set that, to say, well,
Yeah.
look, thank you for coming over. I want to see you, but please just enjoy the time with your grandchild without telling me what to do because it's a different way of life here.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced that?
I definitely have, and I think what helps is really thinking about their perspective and why they're doing what they're doing, because I know deep down, like, when my mom says stuff to me, it's coming from a place of love and care. She really wants to support me. This is all that
Mhm.
she knew in how to raise a kid, and it worked. I'm alive and functioning fine. So she wants me to also carry that on. So I think I have to dig a little deeper even at the first annoyance or struggle with hearing what she's saying, take some time to look underneath the surface of, well, why is she saying this? It probably is coming from a good place, and she just wants to support me and give me her wisdom, and that's her intention. I cannot like it and also like that she's trying to care for me.
Yeah, would it be the same if you had your in-laws doing that? You don't know how they brought up their child. What sort of advice would you give to a mum
Yeah.
who's suffering in the same respect with their in-laws?
That's a great question. So that I would defer to the partners a little bit and maybe try to communicate with the partners, the husbands a little bit more to get more understanding of the in-laws because like you're saying, I don't have that information. And also generally maybe it's how I try to think about things is just assume positive intentions that they're doing this with good intentions, but it just may not sit with me well. So I think communicating with a partner and having the partners really advocate for you and your boundaries as a couple is important. If you're not comfortable doing it, then we still have to be able to articulate that to our partners in a way that's acknowledging all the perspectives and our needs as well.
Ready to give your baby the best start? I've got a free baby massage quick start guide just for you. Discover how to soothe your baby to sleep, boost their muscle strength, and improve their circulation in their legs, all with simple, gentle techniques. Don't wait. Grab it now at mybabymassage.net/massage and see the difference for yourself. First time mums chat is from the very early ages of childhood, from babies up until roughly till about 2, when kids are becoming more independent. When would you start doing that? Would you start doing it when they're 2, or would you start introducing the boundaries when the kids are babies?
We should start setting boundaries even without kids as of right now. If there are things that are on our mind that don't feel good to us or we want to advocate for or talk more about and figure out a better resolution, we should start it as soon as possible. When a baby comes, there's going to be a crying baby, there's going to be
Mm.
postpartum moms, tired people, and conversations get harder to have. Not that they can't happen.
Yeah.
If we're able to have any discussions at all ahead of time, that's great, just to prepare ourselves. Again, like I was mentioning earlier, of like practicing and building up that muscle so that it gets easier as things goes on.
Yeah, I can imagine if you're pregnant and you've got your mum or your in-laws saying, "Oh, you must relax, you must do this. Oh, when I had you, I used to sit around and do nothing. Oh, you can't go out for a walk. You've got to sit down and relax." That must be a hard thing to say to an in-law or a parent as well, I would have thought. The pregnancy
Yeah.
side, because I think in those days, pregnancy was very much, "Oh, you've got to stay at home. You can't go out and do anything because you've got to take care of that baby." You've also got to take care of yourself as well, and you've also got to have your own self-care as well as the self-care for the baby.
Yeah, it's again that worry. I think it does come down to the worry. Like maybe, especially generations ago, if there's less information about what's okay and not okay, or if things seemed more dangerous in some way, it comes down to, again, what's underneath that. And generally speaking, I think it's just
Mhm.
people want to make sure that everyone's safe. So it takes extra time and effort to really look beneath the surface of people's intentions. But I think generally, it's like I said, it's mostly trying to be protective. And we can still do things in a safe way if we're mindful about it. And maybe that's something that could be shared too. Like, hey, I hear you. I appreciate you looking out for me, and I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to be really careful. I'll have this person with me. Don't worry.
Yeah, I thought the points you're making here is you can start to live your life more in the ways that you want if you set those boundaries early. And you can also start to strengthen your most important relationships, which is your baby, which is your partner, and which is also your parents and your in-laws.
Yeah. Because we don't go around setting boundaries all the time with people we don't care about. If I'm walking down the street and someone yells something mean to me, I may not care because I'm never going to see them again. The only times that
Yeah,
we do
yes.
really work on setting boundaries is with the people we care about because we want them to be in our lives, because we want to have them feel acknowledged. We want to feel acknowledged and we want this relationship to go well. So I think that's really important to keep in mind too, because there's a myth that boundaries ruin relationships. People get mad and then they don't talk to us anymore, which could happen. But as long as we're giving them more reasons and explaining and really advocating for our own needs, hopefully they come around and understand. So it's just something to think about too, where boundaries actually strengthen the relationships that we care about the most.
It's interesting you said that was the myth. I think there's also a myth that the grandparents or the in-laws will mold the child into what they want the child to be rather than what you want the child to be. And when you're not there, they might do things that you may not be happy with.
Yeah, they have their own expectations with the kid. Now they're grandparents and they get to have fun and aren't as strict.
Well, yeah, which I think in some ways is good. I know
Mhm.
my parents were like that. They wanted to have fun with their kids, and I think that's important. But I also think that if you have a set routine for putting your child to sleep, or if you have a set routine for a mealtime that you know works for your child, and if they interrupt that, then your child is just going to be very disruptive and not sleep. And it's not going to work for you and your child. The in law or the grandparent is uprooted that. They've said, "Oh, well, I'll let you have your sweets before you go to bed," or whatever it is. And then when you come back, the child will say, "Oh, but grandma let me do that." You're thinking, well, hang on a moment. That's not what I want to do. So that's another boundary you have to set. Please have fun with your grandchild, but please keep those certain boundaries or routines.
Yeah. And I loved how you explained the consequences of it. And I think that's really important to include in our boundaries when we share them with other people. Like, hey, please don't give them candy because they're not going to sleep well at night. And I don't want them to not sleep well because they might make me not sleep well and they might get sick or whatever it is. If you give them a bigger picture of the reason why you want something a certain way, they're more likely to be receptive to it. Whether or not they do, that's totally up to them. But it's better than just don't give them candy. Then they're like, "Well, no, I'm gonna give them candy." So giving them
Yeah.
the bigger picture really helps a lot. Then to another point that I was thinking about as you were talking about the boundaries is, yes, we can set the boundaries with the grandparents, the in-laws, other people who come over, and whether or not they do it, we can still set a boundary with our child. We could say, "Hey, I know grandma gave you candy, but we don't eat candy at night. It just happened this time, but in the future, you're not getting candy before bed, so don't expect this to become like a routine." I know they're young, but you could still say these things to them so that they start understanding too a little bit more. Even again, whether or not they understand it, at least you've communicated it, and then you can like start instilling this practice of boundaries with them as well.
I think also, particularly with babies, when they're sleeping, the sleep routine is so vital because you've got to know your baby and you've set that routine. And if a grandparent comes along and disrupts that routine, it makes it harder for the baby to settle again because they're used to one routine. We all know that babies don't sleep during the night. That's just normal. They don't. You may set a routine where you feed them every 4 hours and then you put them down. And if they cry straight afterwards, you don't immediately pick them up. You might just go and stand by them or pat them or something. If the grandparent then comes along and picks them up and cuddles them or breaks that routine, it's going to be harder for the baby to adjust because they're not used to having that different routine. I've spoken to a lot of sleep therapists who say that routines are good. Then you've got to be flexible, but you don't want a grandparent or an in-law coming around and making it worse for you.
Yeah, and that's a great point too. So another way that we can set boundaries is also through timing and the physical boundary. If we know that sleep time, nighttime is really precious to us and we want to make sure they sleep well, we don't want this nighttime sleep disrupted. Maybe we make sure grandparents don't help out during nighttime sleep. Maybe they come over during the daytime or if they want to help out in the daytime when it's a little bit more flexible and it's not so impactful on our own sleep. Also, really recognizing if we're asking for help from people, how can we also let go of some of these expectations if we know that they are not going to be able to meet it? And the question is, do we want to have them help us then? Or do we hire someone who will follow us to the T of what we're saying? So there's different options in terms of when we ask for help, who we ask for help, and just the timing of things that could also be boundary setting and not just the verbal.
Yeah, I understand that, and I agree with that 100%. But an in-law or grandparent might feel offended that you don't want them to help, that you want somebody else in when they're saying, "Oh, well, I can do it for nothing and I love my grandchild." That must be so hard for a mum to actually turn around and say, "Well, look, mum, I appreciate your support and I really want you to be here for me. But in this case, I really need somebody else here and not you because you're hindering me. You're making it harder for me." That must be a huge thing for a young mother to say to their parents.
Yeah. And again, there could be more context to that too. And depending on what is true for them. For me personally, if nighttime is a difficult time for me, I would tell them like, hey, I would prefer to be alone at night with my husband to take care of the baby at night, but you can come over during the daytime and that's when you can play. She'll be awake more. And
Mhm.
if you want to do something different or help me out, you can help me out there. And that would be the best time to help me. We could also say other things that are true that resonates with us and highlight that a little bit more while acknowledging their feelings. Like, I know you're hurt and you want to help me out even more, but this is great help already. I appreciate it. Trying to also give them more validation for what they are doing, what we want them to do.
Mm.
But it is tough. It is a very tough conversation. And yeah, we never know how
Yes.
other people receive it.
Yeah, exactly. And as you say, it's better to start at the beginning when you know you're pregnant and to just set the boundaries then to your in laws and your parents. And then
Mhm.
they know exactly what to expect when the baby's born. So then, if you do have postpartum or you do have depression, at least your parents can understand where you're coming from and what you want. And they'll probably respect it more because you've had that discussion early on.
Mm. And then we can be flexible and say, "Hey, I know I asked you not to come at night, but this night we're gonna do something, so can you watch them for this night only?" We could even acknowledge what we had said previously and make it a very specific request for a certain thing that we need from them so that we also don't feel like we can't ever ask anyone for help after we set a boundary. Boundaries are meant to
Mm-mm.
be flexible too, as long as we communicate them.
Alison, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing such valuable insights. Setting boundaries is something many mums find challenging, and I know your advice will make a real difference for those listening. It's been wonderful having you here and learning from your expertise. I appreciate the time you've taken to empower our listeners, and I'm sure they'll take away so much from this conversation. So, how can people get in touch with you?
Of course, thank you for having me and for the work that you do for our first-time moms too. It's very important work. Yeah, they can find me at my website at Hey Allison Lee. So that's Allison with 2 L's and I, and the last name is spelled Ly, and that's the same handle on Instagram if they're hanging out there.
As I wrap up this episode of First Time Mums Chat, I wanted to extend a heartfelt thank you to my guest, Alison Lee, for sharing her invaluable insights on setting boundaries and preventing burnout. As a new mum, her experiences and advice offer practical steps to help you navigate the complexities of early motherhood. If you find today's discussion helpful, I encourage you to subscribe to First Time Mums Chat on your preferred podcast platform. By subscribing, you'll ensure you never miss an episode filled with expert advice and support tailored for new mums. Before you go, don't miss out on this amazing freebie. Want to help your baby sleep better, build strength, and improve circulation in just minutes a day? Grab My Baby Massage Quick Start Guide, your simple step-by-step way to give your little one the care they deserve. Head to mybabymassage.net/massage to get yours now. Your baby will thank you for it. Your feedback is incredibly important to me. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Your thoughts help me improve and reach more mums who could benefit from this content. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. I'm here to support you every step of the way. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to having you with me in the next episode of First Time Mums Chat.